Right.
But let's go with late dating, okay? The cross is 30 and 1 Thessalonians is 50. Nice round 20. Now here's the question. In 1 Thessalonians, Jesus is the Son of God. He is Lord, the two loftiest titles, unless you count the half dozen times he's called God in the New Testament. But Lord, a lot of people think Lord is the loftiest title. It's the translation Kyrios. Kyrios was the translation of the Hebrew Jehovah or Yahweh. So it's already there in 1 Thessalonians. Now here's the million-dollar question. If 30 AD Jesus dies, if 20 years later they're calling him Son of God and Lord, what change took place during those 20 years? Is that when all this mythology grew up and he was? No. Why not? Because the early creeds, there are a number of pre-Pauline creeds out of the gate. I use that phrase out of the gate to mean when Christianity started and the preaching started going, what was the earliest preaching like? And Richard Bauckham he got it from somebody else actually, but Richard Bauckham's line is just amazing. And
who is Richard Bauckham?
Richard Bauckham, Cambridge, used to be at St. Andrews University, retired now, one of the top New Testament scholars in the world. And Richard Bauckham says, the earliest Christology is the highest Christology. The old view is that, to use our chart from earlier, the old view is it took the church 65 years to the Gospel of John to unpack John 1 to 18, the prologue that starts out, the Word was God. And he calls him again, he's called God in John 1:18. It took 65 years to realize he was God. Now, Richard Bauckham told me himself, he said, and Jimmy Dunn told me this himself, they both said, that used to be my view. It took 65 years, not for them to make the story up. Jesus' preaching was so heavy, it took them 65 years to unpack what he was saying, and finally someone said, he's got to be God to say that. Okay, Bauckham says, yes, except for one thing. Didn't take to here. It's true back here. And Larry Hurtado's in on this too.
Yeah.
Hurtado, Dunn, and Bauckham. They say the earliest Christology was the highest. How do you know? Well, one of the keys is the pre-Pauline creeds.
Yeah, Larry Hurtado was retired head of the religion department at Edinburgh University, and he says coming out of the gates what? There were two doctrines.
Coming out of the gates, he says the two doctrines were the deity of Christ and the resurrection. Of course, if there's a resurrection, there's got to be a death. So that's just another way of saying we've got the gospel. Deity, death, resurrection.
And Hurtado says coming out of the gates, there would be no Christianity unless these two doctrines were there coming out of the gates. So, we're talking just a few months after Jesus' resurrection, you got all these eyewitnesses, stuff is happening in Jerusalem, but they're saying this the creeds are being memorized by people. The teachings of Jesus are putting into a form that they can do. We're going to do a whole program on what the creeds actually say, because these little creeds are scattered throughout the New Testament, and the scholars have identified them. The best way I can say they have identified them is like, if you guys are writing a term paper, you remember quoting from the Encyclopedia Britannica and trying to work that in like your own words? You're reading your words, and all of a sudden you get, and you say, wow, this doesn't sound like me at all.
Yeah.
So you got to put it in quotes, all right? Otherwise, they would understand it. Well, in the Greek, you can see Paul's writing, and all of a sudden he comes to this language he doesn't even use, and it's a creedal statement.
Plus he says, I gave you what I was given.
Right.
In English, we'd say, Bob says, end note.
Yeah.
We'd use an end note.